Good morning, everyone. All right, while he's pulling up slides, let me do something really quick. Hey Siri, text my artificial pancreas #speaking. I just sent my artificial pancreas that I built myself a message and had it change something. And I was able to do that hands-free. I know you can't read my phone, so there's an image on the screen to show you what that looks like. For those of you who are familiar with Siri, that's not anything novel, but I have a self-built artificial pancreas, and that is meaningful because there is not one available widely on the commercial market, and there was not one available back in 2014 when I first started DIYing my own diabetes. But this is not about how cool it is for me to actually text my artificial pancreas. This is really about what's possible when we decide to stop waiting. And I say we to mean you all, or y'all, and me, but everybody else in the world. There is so much intelligence out there in unexpected places, and we just need to harness it and find it and leverage it and not let ourselves be restricted by the traditional roles and constructs and what we think about when we think about intelligence. And I say this because I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a programmer. Yes, I have an artificial pancreas, but I don't come from any of those traditional backgrounds where you might think intelligence comes from. I'm actually coming from the perspective of somebody who's been living with type 1 diabetes for over 15 years and have been incredibly frustrated the entire time with devices that just weren't good enough. So I'm obviously going to be talking about diabetes some today and some in healthcare. And for those of you who don't spend as much time in the healthcare space as I do, just for context, imagine getting struck by lightning. What do you do to prepare for that? You can't. You just deal. You're hopefully still alive, but you just deal with the after effects of being struck. And that's what happens when you get diagnosed with a chronic disease or something happens, whether it's cancer or type 1 diabetes. You just figure it out and you move on. And people think diabetes is solved. It's easy, right? No big deal. You just take insulin. But the challenge is there's so many things that impact your blood sugar. There are things that make your blood sugar go up. There are things that make your blood sugar go down. And some of them, like insulin and food, you can sort of measure, track, account for. But things like adrenaline and stress, I'm up here, you think I've got some adrenaline going on. Or the fact that my body has been in 2 different time zones 4 times this week, there's something going on there. How do I account for that? It's really, really hard. And you have to deal with the fact that insulin doesn't work instantaneously. I could give myself insulin right now. It's not going to start working at its utmost peak efficacy until 60 to 90 minutes from now. But food hits in 15. So you're constantly playing, I'm trying to plan ahead, but I'm also catching up with things that I did an hour ago. And it's really, really hard, and that's why you're constantly trying to be between the lines of your high and low boundaries. And diabetes, as a result, is always about the DIY. There's 300 things a day that you do that impact your blood sugar. For those of you with wonderful immune systems that have protected your pancreases, congratulations, that's not as big of a deal to you. But for those of us with diabetes and other chronic conditions, this stuff matters. We are constantly thinking about what did we do last night and this morning that's affecting me now? What am I doing now that's going to impact me the rest of the day? So you're constantly experimenting and saying, ooh, eating that granola bar without any protein, that's not getting me the impact that I want. I want to do something different next time. And you're constantly try again. And that's the reward of diabetes. If you do it all right, you get to wake up the next morning and try again. So it would be nice to add technology, right? We're intelligent people. We have all this technology. Wouldn't it be great to add it? And yes, it would. Now, I like to tell people who don't live with diabetes that living with diabetes for the past 15 years was like driving a stick shift. You can do it, but it's a lot of work. It requires both hands, both feet, all capacity fully engaged in the process. Wouldn't it be great if we could have technology added to drive automatic? That would be great. But we know that there's something beyond automatic. What about cruise control? What about a self-driving car? Wouldn't that be great for diabetes or for cancer or for whatever it is? Yes, that would be great. And in diabetes, what we call the self-driving car, like the holy grail of not having to do as much stuff, would be an artificial pancreas. But upwards of 2014, this did not exist. The only technology I had was an insulin pump and a continuous glucose monitor, 2 separate devices made by different manufacturers, which we all know means data from device A did not go to device B. So that required me as a human to pull one device out of my pocket, no matter what I was doing, press the button, look at it, do some math, and decide whether I need to take action. And if I did, I would have to press the buttons on my insulin pump. So that's what we call, human in charge, human driving all of this. And you can imagine that I need to know what's going on. And so I'm making hundreds of decisions and calculations a day, and that can be a little bit distracting. I would rather do something with my life other than do math. For those of you who love math, you are more than welcome to do math all day, every day. Please do my math too. However, as somebody who does not want to spend their time doing math, that's really frustrating. But that's what diabetes is this constant set of math. And because it is so hard, even for somebody like me who is very privileged, I have access to insulin, I have access to this continuous glucose monitor and insulin pump, who am I to be complaining about this amazing technology? But it's still so hard, and I still ended up with weeks like this. My doctor asked me to record my information, and that was hard, one, because getting your own data off your medical devices is kind of a disaster. I had a Mac. The FDA-approved software for my device was on a PC. So how was I supposed to get my data? I used my iPhone, took a picture, posted it in Excel, printed it out, handed it to my doctor to say, okay, here's what happened. And he was like, okay, thanks for logging this. But what do you do with that? If you look at this, if an endocrinologist looks at this, what do you do with this? That's so unhelpful. So the real problem I had was not any of this, but the challenge was my continuous glucose monitor is what's supposed to keep me alive at night. It has alarms that if my blood sugar drops alarmingly low or too high, it's supposed to alarm and wake me up and I'm supposed to do something. Well, I am one of those people who are champion sleepers. I sleep really, really well. It's a great talent. I wish you had it. However, when you have diabetes, it becomes a little bit of a problem. This device is alarming and rattling off the bedstand onto the floor, and I sleep through it. So I began to have this fear of, well, what happens if I don't wake up to my alarm in the morning because my blood sugar is terribly, terribly low? And I asked the manufacturers, hey, I have a problem. Can you solve it? Will you make the alarms louder on this thing? And I asked multiple manufacturers over multiple years, and the answer was, loud enough. It's not a big deal for most people. Most people wake up. Trade-off of battery life? And I was not okay with those answers, but I didn't have anything that I could do with it. And I wish I could get my data off my device because I know my lovely iPhone in my pocket makes incredibly loud noises, sometimes when I don't want it to. And wouldn't it be great if I could put the data from here to my phone and have that wake me up? But you remember how I talked about how hard it was to get my data off my device? That makes it a problem. Luckily, though, I turned to Twitter, and I found somebody online who managed to figure out how to get data off this device in real time. He plugged a cable into the computer, reverse engineered the software, the same software used to read the data, but he wrote a script, so it would read every 5 minutes. So I was able to upload the data in real time, send it through the internet around the world, and down to my phone where it would make louder alarms. But I decided not just to do that. I wanted to let my family, I live by myself, I wanted my family and my loved ones to be able to access my data. So I created a remote web page, and I didn't want them to get every alarm every time I got one because they don't need all that information. They just need to know when it's an emergency. So I added snooze buttons. So if I did wake up, I would press the button and say, I'm okay, don't wake anybody else up. But if I didn't wake up and press the button, it would escalate to my family around the world. They could pick up the phone and call me, and if they needed to, call the apartment manager, etc. Luckily, that never needed to happen. But what we learned was that, hey, Dana has become an incredibly well-trained guinea pig. One, we've managed to wake her up at night, but two, we've trained her to push the buttons. And I say this jokingly because I'm the one who calls myself a guinea pig, nobody else does. But I was entering everything that I did into the system and realized you could actually build an algorithm to predict into the future, not just react right now, but predict into the future what your blood sugar is going to be. And not only predict, but tell me, you're gonna go low unless you do something. But if you do action X now, you will prevent that low, or make it less bad, or prevent that high. And wouldn't that be great? So we essentially built this open loop system. And it's called an open loop because the data from the devices went into the system, I entered it, it ran it through the algorithm, told me what to do, and I would push the buttons. So remember all the calculations I was telling you about? I trained the computer to do that. That was really great, but I was still the human. So what if, oh, and by the way, this is a DIY system, so you can do whatever you want with it. And my then boyfriend, now husband, at one point, I had a bad low blood sugar. He said, what can I do? I'm like, you can't really do anything. It's diabetes. I'm low. He's like, but what if I could do something? I was like, hugs help. So he co-designed the system with me, and a couple weeks later, I was walking between 2 campuses for work, and my insulin kicked in faster than I expected because of the exercise. I went low, and I get an alert that says you need a lot of carbs, go eat. And so I went in to tell the system I'm eating, and I see this, which says 34 carbs, sure, but 1 hug, what is that? And I clicked the button, and this popped up. And that's what's cool about DIY, is that my system can give me a hug. And can you ever imagine an FDA-approved system giving somebody a hug? Maybe not. But what we figured out is we have all of this technology, we have an algorithm, and I learned about open source. It was open source code that enabled me to get my glucose data off my device. And because I started talking about my innovations and figuring out, should I put my code out open source, talking with other people, I found somebody else. And he figured out how to communicate with the insulin pump. And we figured out how to create the artificial pancreas as a result using open source code, everyday hardware. Who's heard of a Raspberry Pi? Quite a few people, right? You can buy them on Amazon. If you plug in a Raspberry Pi, a radio stick, and a battery with our open source code and our algorithm, and an insulin pump and a continuous glucose monitor, you get an artificial pancreas. Back in 2014 when these things did not exist on the commercial market. And life with an artificial pancreas is amazing. If for those of you who have kids, if you've ever had a kid so excited about a toy they will never put it down, they take it with them everywhere, that's me on the right side. 2 days after I built my artificial pancreas, I'm out in the cold of Seattle not wanting to let this thing go. We originally designed this just for overnight because that was my problem. But it was so amazing, I plugged a battery in it and took it with me everywhere that I went because it worked so well. And you can see the differences in these lines. These flat lines, every single line you see represents something like 8, 10, 12 hours of beautiful, glorious, uninterrupted sleep. I built a louder alarm system to wake me up, and then I built a system to do everything for me so I didn't have to actually wake up. Those alarms are there if I need them, but now I really don't need them anymore. And because I had learned about open source and because I couldn't keep this amazing technology to myself, we decided to create a movement, which is what we call OpenAPS, the open source artificial pancreas system, to help encourage innovation around this. Because it's not like commercial companies are not working on this technology, but they've been designing this stuff for 5 years. Now in 2017, there is one commercial system that just got approved. It's just rolling out to market. There's something like 30,000 people in line for it. And that is a small fraction of all the tens and hundreds of thousands of people with diabetes who want this stuff. And again, I've had this for now 2.5 years. There are now over 300 people worldwide who have also built these systems, which means we have over 1 million patient hours. So yes, we could have waited, but why wait if we have the kind of technology in our pockets that allow us to interoperate the medical devices that are not yet designed to be interoperable because of the medical device design cycle where this stuff was designed 5 and 10 years ago. So no, this is not a cure for diabetes, but it makes life so much better than it used to be. And that's what we should be doing, is thinking about these little tweaks, these little iterations. It's not going to solve or create world peace, but if you can provide uninterrupted sleep to a parent and their child, or to an adult with diabetes, I always said even if one other person did this, it would be worth the thousands of hours of development that we've done over the years. But there's now hundreds of people and hundreds more who are going to be doing this. It is absolutely worth it, and that's what we should be striving to do. But I have now, over the past couple of years, spoken with many people who don't work in healthcare, people who do, whether they work for a traditional company, they're an academic researcher, or they work for the FDA. And so I've gotten a lot of pushback and challenges on what we're doing. And that's why I agreed to speak today, because I think it's important to think about people who come from outside the traditional roles of innovation, people who aren't working in academic institutions, people who aren't working for the companies, but people who have ideas, they're out there. And what might change in the world? How far might we progress? How might we get up to that second and third loop that Jeff was talking about if we leverage the innovations that are already happening every day? I guarantee you in New York City, there are probably thousands of innovations that people are doing in their garage, in their offices, and not even thinking about them as innovations, but they're innovative. And they're going to change the way we do everything. And what happens if we enable patients to prioritize? Here's what matters. Here's what we need to design for. A lot of the innovation happens around what doctors and the healthcare system traditionally thinks needs to be done to improve diabetes. Ooh, this meter is purple. That's great, but that's not going to change my life. That's not going to allow me to sleep. I do like purple. However, not everything needs to be purple, and that is not innovation. That's just marketing. So let's figure out how to actually prioritize around the true needs of patients and design for that. And I really want to know what happens if we surface data to everybody make this data, our data, we're making our data publicly available. What would happen if anybody, regardless of role or credential, could look at that data and design and innovate and really take it to the next level? You all have amazingly unique perspectives from your careers and your years of learning and training and working with colleagues. But sometimes people come from different backgrounds or different perspectives and just have an idea that's crazy enough to say, hey, this might work. We might be able to do it this way. And if we work together, I really do think that we are going to be able to drastically change things. But it really comes back to waiting. Are we going to wait? Are we going to accept being told 1 year, 5 years, 10 years to make this happen? Or are we going to say we're not going to wait? So I ask you to ask amazing questions, and as we work throughout the day, to think about the timeline of innovation, because I really do think that all of our intelligence and the world's intelligence is going to make a difference, but we can't accept waiting anymore. Thank you.